Welcome to the Kadara Woman podcast, where we amplify the voices of inspiring African women making waves across the globe. I am your host, Lala Sheba Harris. In today's episode, I sit down with Foluso Gbadamosi, an award-winning business and technology professional who's blazing trails on leadership development. From her early days as a computer science student to becoming a Gallup Strengths certified coach and author, Foluso's story is one of self-discovery, purpose, and unleashing potential. Part of the reason why I thought Felicia would be great to feature on this podcast was because of her journey, really. I've seen her become this accomplished technology professional to now a purpose-driven leadership expert. So get ready to be inspired as we dive into how Felicia navigated her career path, embraced her unique talents, and is now empowering the next generation to do so. Sit back, tune in, and let's unlock some superpowers together. Hello, listeners. I am super excited to talk to Foluso Gbadamosi. She's an award-winning business and technology professional, and her last stint included serving as executive director of Junior Achievement Nigeria. Foluso also sits on multiple boards, was selected as executive coach for the Obama Foundation Scholars Program for 2023 and 2024, further solidifying her commitment to leadership and development. She's also a Gallup Strengths certified coach, an author, a keynote speaker, and the co-founder of a nonprofit called Serving with Love. Felicia, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you, Lola. Thanks for having me. I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm a little congested, but I didn't want it to stop the amazing conversation that I know we're going to have. So, one thing I like to do on the Kadara Woman podcast is to explore how you got to where you are today. And so, the first question I usually ask people is, what is their heritage? What African country are their roots in? And how did that influence the woman they are today?
That's so interesting. Okay, so I am from Nigeria, which is the largest Black nation in all of the universe. How has that influenced me and my journey? One of the major ways that it's influenced me is in understanding the responsibility, I think, really, of coming from a nation that has such a mix of people. So we have so many tribes, sorry, so many ethnic groups. Apparently, we shouldn't say tribes, we should say ethnic groups. There's so many ethnic groups, there's so many um so there's 6 geopolitical zones, and it's such a diverse country. There's also a lot of economic issues. And I think that, if you have any sort of privilege and you were raised like I was, you would feel some sort of responsibility towards, kind of just fulfilling your potential, your God-given potential in order to, be part of making your nation what it was created to be. And so for me, that is a huge part of everything that I do, that I've done, and so on.
So you mentioned that you were raised with privilege. Can you talk about, and we want to go a little bit further back, can you talk about how that influenced you, even the way you were born? You talked about the geo-economic and socioeconomic status of Nigeria, but how about your childhood? How about what was your home life like? How were you influenced by your parents? All that good stuff.
So I grew up in the 80s, was the best time to have grown up.
Yes.
And I grew up in Nigeria. So I was born and raised in Nigeria. Grew up in what you would have called then a middle class family because we still had a middle class in those days. We don't have a lot of middle class anymore. But yeah, so my family was middle class. My dad worked in insurance. My mom was a medical lab technologist, and they both worked for, pretty good organizations for the time. They sent us to great schools. I think my parents were very intentional about education, so they would deprive themselves to send their children to like the best schools. I think many Nigerians, especially of a particular region, I think do.
Mm.
It's not odd, like it's pretty common, to sacrifice and do your best to send your children to the best school or to send yourself to the best schools, as it were. Because obviously, when you have a great education, I mean, that's a springboard for so many other amazing things. My childhood was fantastic. I'm the firstborn of four. Had a great childhood, with family. with lots of love, very, very supportive parents that obviously expected a lot of you. My parents always made us realize that we did have some level of privilege and that we had a responsibility, by having that level of privilege. And the privilege does not even necessarily mean, oh my goodness, like your parents are ballers, but just because you lived in a place where the economic divide is so wide and it's so obvious. My own parents were very intentional. I mean, they would make us do all kinds of things like Christmas time, we would go to motherless babies' homes, we would go to orphanages, we would give out stuff. We were made to, look through our stuff. What aren't you using anymore? What is still of good condition? Can you, pack it up together and let's give it to those that don't have. Don't be wasteful. We had, opportunity to travel a lot because my parents were very intentional, not just about written education, but also just kind of exploring the world. For me, it's really that thing of if you've been given a lot, then you should also, be willing to give a lot. It's
Mhm.
literally like sowing and reaping. And I feel like my parents sowed so much into us, even education and exposure, but even with values, like very intentional. My parents were practice what we preach kind of parents, like do as they do. A lot of parents do they say and they don't do. My parents were do and you literally saw them doing a lot for people, like constantly. I mean, some day, my dad passed away about 10 years now, it would be this Friday. And so date, I meet people who say to me some of the things that my father did for them that I'm just like, what? I mean, down to my father paying for people's IVF treatments because he was like, oh, you don't have children yet, what's going on? So I come from a heritage of so much like giving of self, giving of finances, giving of time, that for me, like that has so shaped like everything about my life, everything that I do. It shapes how I raise my children. And I'm fortunate, to have a husband who, has similar values. So at least we kind of flow on that end. Yeah.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And you talked about education. You talked about basically being selfless, being taught to be selfless, which is not a common trait, especially in Nigeria. There's a very selfish outlook in life. It's always survival of the fittest mode because of the economic issues that we all witnessed growing up. And
Yeah.
I can relate to you about middle class as well. And I think even that
Yeah.
middle class self was a stretch, right? There are different aspects of middle class back in the 80s, early 90s. You talked about education, so I want to sit on that for a little bit. Do you remember, actually twofold question, did your parents influence you to get a certain degree or your academic goals? Or do you remember what you wanted to be when you were growing up?
hmm I remember all of it. So I wanted to be an architect because when I was in secondary school, I loved technical drawing. There was a subject in the unity schools back in the day. It's called technical drawing, which I loved. I love TV so much. I love TV. I love math. I didn't like physics. I enjoyed chemistry. I hated biology. I hated reading. I hated anything to do with like notes, like history, all those kind of things. Like why? Hated them with all of my heart. Logical, I was there. Logic and I were like this. So I remember loving architecture. I wanted to study it. Not sure how I changed, but I do remember that my father very, now in retrospect as a parent, very cleverly influenced me into choosing something else to study, by kind of just telling me, oh, because I loved gadgets and my dad always, always bought me gadgets. And now that I'm a parent, I can see how he was subtly brainwashing me into loving something. But I guess it also came to me naturally because some of my siblings have no interest in gadgets and still don't. But I love gadgets. I was the one in the house. Remember the VCR, like an 80s baby as well. If our VCR was not working, I would fix it. I would like take it apart. I would fix it. So I like things like that. So I remember my dad saying to me, "Oh, you can study computer engineering." And I was like, okay. And then he brought some of his friends that had studied computer engineering. My dad was very good with networks and just kind of always knowing who to bring around when, So he introduced me to some of his friends that studied computer engineering. I spoke to them. It sounded like an exciting course. So I said I was going to study that. So when I actually got into university, I got into university, into the School of Engineering to study computer engineering. However, I very quickly discovered that I had to do physics. And you see, I hated physics with all of my being. So because I'm a people person and I'm very good at sweet talking my way out of things, I went to my advisor and I was like, hey, madam advisor lady, you see this course? of study, this school of engineering, I can't do physics. Is there still with computer and no physics? He said computer science. I said, that's the one. I gotta change. Fortunately for me, I was in the US, so I could change. So I took my course of study to computer science. And I let my parents know after I had changed it because I wasn't interested in anybody trying to, convince me otherwise. And my dad and I, very, very, very similar. My dad could convince a well-to-buy later. He was that kind of a smooth talker, stellar kind of person. So I was like, I'm not going to talk too much after because I know he's going to convince me otherwise. So I changed to computer science, and then I told him, I'm like, oh, I changed, but guess what? It's not a big deal. It's so similar, I make it sound really delicious to them. But that's really what now happened, Lola, because I'm a people person, remember? And when I started computer science, I very quickly discovered that computer science is one of those courses where I think it's better for introverts or people who don't mind being alone for hours talking to a computer. That is not me. So when I discovered that I had to spend most of my days writing code, running the code, checking for errors, I was like, this is not working for me. It just made like I didn't really understand personality types and all of that then. But in retrospect, my personality type and computer science are just opposites. So upon further investigation by my sophomore year, I discovered that there's one course called information technology. That one is even more people related, but also to do with computer. So at that point, I said, I can't change my major again and not tell my mother in advance. So I called her and I said to her, "Oh, Mom, I was doing some research and I discovered this other course." My mother at that point said, "You are not changing any course again. That course you are in, you're going to finish that course. You hear me?" Because my mother, unlike my father, had been to school in Nigeria completely, like throughout. My dad had gotten his master's in the US. My dad understood that, changing majors, things like that, when not a big deal. My mother was not having it because the Nigerian system and the UK system are very, very similar. And normally, what you start with is what you must finish with. So that's how I had to finish the computer science course. I had to finish it. I struggled to finish it. But I'll tell you something. In retrospect, now that I'm much older and I've done a lot of reflections and I understand myself so much better, I finished it with the help of my personality in the sense that I'm able to connect with people to solve problems. I realized that this course and it just wasn't working. It was too stressful for me. It was strenuous. I didn't enjoy it in any way. The best part of my days was when I was, doing group project with my computer science friends, or we were studying together in the library. I was always talking in between the studying. And so with the help of others, I was able to complete the course. And for me, that was such a valuable lesson now in retrospect. And I try to teach this to young people as well. And I wrote about it in my teenagers book, was just understanding yourself such that you can use what God has given you for free to achieve your goals. You know what I mean? So you can actually intentionally use your personality to achieve your educational goals, your business goals, your personal goals, but you have to understand yourself. You have to accept yourself, and you have to be willing to be okay with the fact that nobody's perfect, right? Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. There's no perfect personality, but yours is yours, and you need to master it such that you can use it towards achieving your goals.
Wow, thank you. And I I can so resonate with everything you said about that whole engineering degree because I had a similar experience with getting into chemical engineering. But this is not about me. This is about you. And so you got the degree, you got the computer science degree because you're not allowed to switch. I also know you got a master's in management in information systems. So you found a way to go get that MIS degree.
And I loved it so much.
See, and for the younger generation, it's like tech, right? It's the same thing. So, how did you get started in your career with that background? And when did you move back to Nigeria?
Okay, so I started my career as soon as I finished university. So fortunately for me, I was very fortunate to get a fantastic internship when I was in my junior year, which is my third year, with Eli Lilly, which is one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. And I remember doing that internship. It helped me once again understand myself better because during the internship, I was testing like Java code and doing all of these things. And my favorite part of the day, once again, had to do with when I was with human beings.
Hmm.
And so it didn't take me long to discover that, you know what, I need to figure out, the best way to get a role that would combine, technology and people somewhat. After I graduated, I got a job at a telecommunications company in the US called EMW. And that job was a fantastic job in that I think it really helped me understand myself better because once again, I was testing databases, I was creating manuals for this software application that they had just created and all of this stuff. And I spent a lot of time alone doing that. My favorite time of the day was when I was going for lunch with my colleagues, and we went for lunch like every day because there were a bunch of us that we like to eat, so we would always go for lunch together. And I realized that the best part of my day was going for lunch with my colleagues, but it wasn't because of the food. It was because of just the human interaction. You know what I mean? Because my job had to do with me and my computer all day. So I remember telling myself that, you know what, this is a great experience for me. And I have so many things in that job that I use till date. So another learning from me is no experience is ever really wasted. You know what I mean? Like you're always going to get something or learn something. But when I decided to get a master's degree, I did the research and I discovered that management information systems was a great combination of technology, people, problem solving, all of the things that I love. So I was like, you know what, this is a no-brainer. So I made a plan. I applied for my master's in that. I got into George Washington University. And I love that program so much because it's actually in their school of business. And so it was a very problem solving in a business world, technology kind of, a degree. And there was a lot of group work. Oh my goodness, it was fantastic. I loved it. We were always working in groups. So finished working for 2 years, got my master's. I got my master's in 1 year because I wanted to move back to Nigeria. I was very and still, very, passionate about Nigeria, and just, really believing that I wasn't created as a Nigerian by accident. And so there's a reason why God made me a Nigerian. And, so I really wanted to move back. At the time, my parents were like slow your roll a little bit. Why not, do like a bit more things in the US? But I was like, nope, I want to move back. And so I did what I do, which is I made a plan. I did myself a job before I had finished my master's. There was a company at the time that used to recruit people that had gone to school abroad into Nigerian companies, actually companies, so companies on the continent, so multinationals like Shell, Procter and Gamble, and all of them. And I had gotten an interview with them by the special grace of God in London. I flew to London. I did these interviews, but ironically, remember I said I'm a people person. I remember hanging around in the lobby of where they were doing the interviews. I met this lady from Procter and Gamble. Me and her got GC, and she's like, "Listen, I need to, apply for P&G." I'm like, "Sure, why not?" Applied for P&G, ended up getting the P&G role, and then we back to Nigeria in 2006. And so that's how I moved back to Nigeria. Moved back to Nigeria, did my mandatory service year of NYSC with a bunch of my friends that had also moved back at the time. And we just formed like a community here, So a bunch of us, and it helped a lot that I had gone to secondary school here. I went to Queen's College, passed on the torch, fantastic, fantastic secondary school, a huge part of my life, like such a huge, major, major part of like my life. And back to Nigeria, I think for me was just such a dream. I really wanted to. I did it. I got a job myself. So my parents couldn't really stop me because at the end of the day, this girl has gotten a job. They are moving her back. So what am I going to say? In retrospect, though, I do think that I could have done things a bit different. But I think youthful exuberance is a beautiful thing. Let me just stop there.
Wait, so well, we have to unpack it. What would you have done differently? And because it sounds like you were not even afraid, you just did it. I don't hear the usual uncertainty that you have when you're forced to move back.
Nah, I didn't have any uncertainty. I had no uncertainty. I had zero uncertainty. I knew I wanted to move back and I was going to move back. I should probably have maybe waited it out a little bit, maybe worked a little bit longer, gotten a little bit more experience. I would have just stretched it out a little bit longer, right? So I think that I would definitely still have gotten the same masters because I really enjoyed it. I think from a work perspective, I really was learning myself more on the job. I think I could have, maybe stretched that out a little bit longer. Ultimately, still moving, but I was very much in a case to move back to Nigeria. It was like there was something chasing me.
So, but why do you think you had to work longer in the States? You're still going to be working. Was there an experience you thought you missed?
Yeah, so I think that from it, so I'll tell you why I'm saying that. the world that we currently live in, for me, has become borderless, right? It's totally borderless. There's so much that we can do from any continent, and it does benefit you to have multiple citizenship. I think that if I had waited a little bit longer, I would have gotten an American citizenship, which I didn't even care for at the time. Like, I don't need this. This is what's the use of this? What's the purpose of this? Now, in retrospect, I don't think that it's about an American citizenship per se. I think it's about just having so if you go to school abroad, if they really spend all of that big money paying your fees abroad, and you have the opportunity to get any sort of additional citizenship in the world that we live in today, I do think that it definitely helps you as far as just having more opportunities. And I say to young people all the time, I'm like, listen, this is not about never moving back to Nigeria or whatever. I mean, I'm just an advocate. I mean, I live here in Nigeria. But I do think that you do have the opportunity to have more open doors and more opportunities for yourself if you expose yourself to multiple citizenship. It's really just that simple.
Well said. Well said. And I appreciate you being very transparent about the why, because usually that's the trade-off when you don't get the citizenship. All right. So we're gonna switch gears here. This part I'm always excited about because you talked about your childhood, your early influences, your career path, how you moved back to Nigeria. But I want to dive into the heart of the podcast, which is the Kadara moment, which Kadara means destiny. And every purpose driven person I have met, and that you probably have met, had a pivotal moment in their life when they had that clarity or realization that sets them on their path. And so I have your book here, your second book. You actually have written what, four books now, and it's your 2022 book, Unleash Your Superpowers. You talk about feeling restless, searching for answers. You also mentioned, in your words, you didn't think you had any unique gifts or talents to map out a purpose-driven career around. There's a lot in there. Can you talk about that moment?
Yeah, that is one of the most like you said, it's definitely a pivotal moment of my life. Because what had happened, on this journey now, you're probably already figuring out like the kind of personality that I have just from my story. Because some people listen to me and they're like, so you really did all of those things and you felt like it wasn't enough. And I'm like, yeah. Because I also don't think that I'm not a box person. I don't hate people being put in a box. I hear all these quotes, it's probably that like that person's path. I believe, and that's also why I made the comments even about, exposing yourself to different opportunities and potentially even like citizenships is because you can have your own trail, right? You don't need to follow anybody's path. You can actually create a trail for yourself. And that trail is not you creating it for yourself. It's a trail that God had already kind of pre-programmed you to create. Because guess what? Everybody that we say is successful, everybody that we say is purpose driven or whatever it is, if they hadn't done what they did, many of us wouldn't even be where we are today. So I'm not an advocate of copy and paste. I hate copy and paste. Copy and paste stresses me line. I'm like, why you gotta copy somebody else? I understand seeing people's lives and gleaning things from it, taking things out of it and all of that. But I don't like that whole like all these songs, Buffalo Bidangote, or those songs, they stress me out. I have no problem with Aliko Dangote. He's a fantastic man doing great work. I have no problem with all of the people that are like him. But I hate it when I hear songs where people are saying, oh, I want to be Bill Gates. I want to be Oprah Winfrey. Why? Be yourself. But I will keep going on and on about that if I don't answer your question. So now back to your question. So the point for me was I got to a place where at this point in time, this is about 10 years or so roughly. It needs to be over. I already had my first daughter. Is more than 10 years actually, because my second daughter is about to be 10. So it's definitely more than 10 years because my second daughter was not even in sight at the time. I already had my first daughter. I had a great job on paper, married, living in Lagos, living the good life in quotes. But I just felt like there was more to my life than all these wonderful things that I had. Now, the thing about me that I've noticed is when I start getting restless, it's usually God's way of cooking me, to kind of wake up and tune into his program or his frequency. Let me put it that way, his frequency. And so what happened for me at the time was I was super restless. And at first the restlessness was very uncomfortable for me. Not because I'm an introvert, I don't do well with I have one friend, she'll say, just sit with your feelings. I don't do well with sitting with my feelings. I'm like, well, why am I sitting alone with any feelings? I don't understand. That was, first of all, my very mathematical, logical mind was like, okay, this is a problem that can be solved in a very logical way. You're feeling restless because clearly there's something in your life that needs to fit into something else and it's not fitting. And it might be your job. Maybe, oh, I know. It must be because maybe your job is not fulfilling you. Maybe it's not fulfilling you because it's not in line with your purpose. But what is your purpose? What are your gifts? What are your talents? And I started asking myself all these questions, and I'm like, actually, I'm talentless because I mean, I studied these things in school, but anybody can have studied these things in school. And I started feeling like the people around me that I knew that were doing great were clearly, in their purpose because they studied these really phenomenal things, and they were on the path with those things. And I told myself some of these stories that we tell ourselves when we're trying to philosophize our life and make sense of things. Yeah, I started figuring it all out. And I started asking people questions because I'm a problem solver. So I remember going online, finding all these assessments, printing them out, harassing everybody, my poor band, my friends, my family members. What do you guys think I'm good at? Because I've seen all these things. I said, oh, what do people say you're good at? What is this? So I was asking everybody all these questions. I still have the printout till date. They are in my cupboard upstairs somewhere. The portraits that I killed, printing out all of that paper. Anyway, so went on this whole journey trying to figure all of that out. And then got into a place where I got clarity because I think that my clarity started coming in pieces. But I'll tell you what the moment for me was actually a God moment. And I can't tell any of my life story without my faith because my faith has been so pivotal in every area of my life, like in a very wild way. It was such a good moment where I remember just feeling very restless one day being in church and seeing something about serving in church. And that's a whole long story that I won't get into because we won't leave here today. But some of it was I then decided, what, let me, volunteer some of my time and start to serve in her. So I started serving in church, and that didn't change my life because it helped me, first of all, start to see things about myself and my giftings, just the kind of things that I was getting energy from versus the kind of things that drained me. The kind of situations that I would clearly just naturally, you know, blending into versus other people maybe blended more naturally into something else. So just helped me kind of see myself in different ways. And then I had a really good moment one day during a service that my pastor, Pastor Godman of Elevation Church, preached several years ago, where he was talking about being a kingdom addict. And that day was actually the day. That was the very day, Lola, that very day was the day where everything was just like boom. And from that day on, listening to that service, plugging more into the God frequency changed my whole trajectory because I then realized that
Mm,
first of all, we've all been sold a lie. Your life is not your career is not your life. And I
mhm,
love it when I see people like you who are women in career and you're doing things like this Kadara Woman podcast because it goes back to the point that your career is not your life. We are
mhm,
multifaceted human beings. God didn't create you to just be a wife and just a mother and just a daughter and just a sister and just a friend. There's so many things within you as seed that God has put. And it's your job to discover what those things are. Be very intentional, about deploying them into the world, developing them, and playing your part and me playing my part as well in making the world a better place. But that doesn't come from me focusing on bread and butter. Oh, I need to get the highest paying job in the world. Oh, I need to be like Dangote. Oh, I need to be like Bill Gates. No, you need to be like you. But you cannot be you if you're trying to be like somebody else. You also cannot be like you if you don't spend the time discovering, what your gifts are, what your talents are, what these special abilities that you have and all of that. And so I think for me, that's really like my story in a nutshell. So from that point on, went on a very intentional journey on just being on God's frequency. I have made mistakes along the way, obviously, because if you are a believer, if you're a person of faith and you're on God's frequency, sometimes you think you are hearing God, but really you are hearing yourself. The things that God is so thank God that God is so
yeah.
kind. And even when we're hearing ourselves, He takes us out of it. But at that point in time, I then, got really deeper into like my faith and all of this stuff. I then started doing I had been just assessments, because like I said, I'm very logical and I like frameworks. I then
Mhm,
came
mhm,
across the Gallup Strengths assessment, and it has been the most life changing of all the assessments that I ever took. And I think it's because of the way that it was created. and the way that it delivers your reports and the kind of words that it uses and the way that it describes you and all of that, So I did that one and I got that one done and I was like, you know what, this is the best one I've ever done. I must become a certified coach because everybody has to know what their strengths are. And that's what got me into into like that whole phase, led me to writing my second book, which was also another God moment because if you know me, remember I said I hated reading in anything to do with reading English was not my thing. So I knew that even these books are not me. Like it's definitely because I have some amazing skill. It's all part of kind of being tuned into God's frequency and letting those seeds that God put in me grow and germinate without me getting in my own way because I'm like, no, I can't do that. I'm also fearless to a certain extent, like you said. So the way that I was raised, my dad would always ask you, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? They'll say no. So why am I afraid? You know what I mean? So I actually was raised to just be bold. My dad would make you sit in meetings with people that were two, three times your age and give your feedback. You know what I mean? Like, sit in this meeting. What do you think? So I wasn't raised to like power. Like it took a long time to understand why certain people, women and men, felt like they didn't have a voice because that's what I was raised. I was raised with, if you don't have a voice, you have a voice in this house. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's my story in a huge nutshell.
No, I love that. I was here smiling because I felt like you were saying part of my story as well. No, but that is why the Kadara Woman podcast was created because I was also restless and I was looking for that moment of clarity. And I wanted, to your point about, you said it best earlier. It's not about copying other people, but to just see if someone has done it, I can figure it out. Like it's almost like representation, which I know you also care a lot about representation. Yeah, and your dad even brought in people who had done computer engineering, right, to influence you because just seeing that gave you some inkling. Okay, I can do this, and so that was why Kara was born. Speaking of voice, though, there's actually something else you said in your book that triggered my memory, and you said to dominate the world you have to develop your superpowers until your voice matters. And I just loved how you said that because it goes back to God gives us all these innate talents. It's up to us to actually figure it out and be intentional with it. So
Absolutely.
you did all these assessments. You were going through this introspective moment in your life. Were you doing this on your own? Like apart from just taking the assessments, what else were you doing to get to that moment of crystal clarity? I know you mentioned your faith, but was there anything else you were doing?
No, so so eventually, so after I did the Clifton Strengths assessment, I did get coaching on my report because I wanted to really understand it, and I met this fabulous, awesome lady, Kenny, who lives in Florida, who is a Clifton Strengths assessment coach as well. And me, I had connected, and she had these great classes, and I joined a few of her classes, and it was really eye-opening. But I mean, that's like way at the other end of my discovery. During the process. I read books. Miles Monroe has so many phenomenal books, to do with purpose and just kind of discovering yourself. There's a fantastic book
Yes.
that one of my pastors had gifted me called Why You Act the Way You Do by Tim LaHaye. Life-changing book. Yes. So that book digs very deeply into personality types, so it talks about the four temperaments, so the sanguine, melancholic, choleric, and them. And it really digs deep into it. When it's describing them, there are things about yourself that you haven't been able to put words to, or things about yourself that you're even annoyed by. You're like, why do I behave like this? And it's telling you that is who you are. You need to embrace who you are. So stop being so angry by the fact that you talk too much. Why don't you use the things that you like to feel and channel it towards making an impact, right? There's a reason why God made all of us the way that He made us. And so we constantly battle. Just some of us, our biggest problem actually comes with that inner battle of accepting who we are. And the reason I'll tell you is because for many of us, when we were younger, negative labels like they used to describe you. And I always say this to my children. I'm like, listen, just ignore people and their negative labels. You can literally take feedback. But I'll tell you something. If you're big, they'll say you're fat. If you're skinny, they'll say you're skinny. If you take too much, they'll say you take too much. If you don't, they'll say you take too. But this has something negative to say about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you need to understand that you let other people dictate and define you and put in a box and tell you, oh, You talk too much, so that means that this is how you are going to be. Or, oh, you can't talk at all, so you have to be like this. Because you're an introvert, so you're weird. So like, you're weird. You need to just be like, that's how I am. Thank you. And learn what I like to call self-management. One of my biggest like life goals is to teach people how to manage themselves because you can't be who you are. However, you can learn how to turn it down or turn it up. You can learn how to manage different parts of your personality depending on what situation you're in. You can learn how to maximize your true self by really learning how to manage yourself. You know how to manage yourself if you don't know yourself. I need to work on ourselves because the world makes us feel like there's something wrong with us. So yeah, that's it.
No, I love that. I think there's so much in there because I think you also touched on how to tune out the world. And it goes back to, again, knowing yourself, doing the work to be introspective. People do project on you, right? They could tell you,
Absolutely.
oh, you talk too much, you're going to be X. And so it really is internal work to block out that noise. Even the well meaning people who are talking to you and giving you feedback, it is you who
Absolutely.
truly understands. And one thing I always tell people is at the end of the day, when you have an idea, you have a dream, a project, or whatever that comes into your heart, you're the one who got the download. You're the one who got the received it. No one else saw that. Literally, no one else is in your head. So how are you going to let the outside world, who wasn't there to watch the movie in your head, who wasn't there to receive the message, tell you how to deliver it? There's a lot of work that goes into that level of self confidence. So love what you said. I thought it was very good.
That is what you just said is so spot on. And I think that as parents, or guardians, or, just mentors, or anybody at all that has influence over any younger person, I think that we really need to be intentional in helping people, do what you just said, which is learning how to manage tuning out, and tuning in. There's things that you do need to take on as feedback, but you really have to master how not to let whatever it is that God is asking you to do to become a conference call with everybody else because it wasn't a conference call. You know what I mean? Like you said about the download, sometimes some of the people that are closest to you are just like, really, this is your download. Okay. You know what I mean? So yeah, we really need to teach, our children and people just how to learn how to tune things in and out.
Yeah, and I think the sooner the kids, which we'll talk about your book in a second, figure that out, I think they'll be set up for success. I think the world will be better because of that.
Absolutely.
And they'll step into the purpose sooner, for lack of a better time frame.
Absolutely.
But before we
Absolutely.
go into your book, though, because there's a lot in there, I still want to touch on some of the things that you've accomplished, and you touched on it a little bit. So you had a career that spanned multiple industries, from oil and gas, FCMG, which is fast moving consumer goods, also known as consumer packaged goods in the US, tech, and now you're a coach and you advocate for initiatives that develop the youth. I can hear that in everything you're saying, but I'm curious to know the unexpected things you discovered on your path to becoming a Gallup strengths coach. Like, what were the things you didn't realize you were going to discover in that journey?
Well, first of all, I mean, if you had told me, I think even like 10 years ago, that I would be doing some of the things I'm doing now, I would laugh. If you had told me that I would write books, I would be like, yeah, sure, whatever. If you had told me that, I would be impacting the way that I'm impacting now, and I would be, recognized for it, and I would get awards. People would actually think, wow, she's doing something and making a difference. I would have been like, really? Because I think it goes back to like that box, and just being very intentional not to let society and even yourself put you in a box. Because the thing is, if you are, let me say African, if you're an African woman, who has a family, I think there's certain just cultural and environmental limitations that you might not even realize are being put on you. And so if you push and really tune in to hear from God, push to understand yourself, your abilities, where it stops and where it starts and all of that, you can live a very substandard life. You know what I mean? Like I very quickly on my journey discovered that money is very important, so please let me not even pretend. Money is of utmost importance, especially now that the Naira is doing this thing that the Naira is doing, but let's leave that to the side for now. But money is not more important than what God created it to be. So if you let money take you off track, that's really disaster because you actually end up So it's interesting how many ways they act add value that we don't recognize because we're so used to systems of the world, right? So, you need to earn a paycheck this way, and it has to be that way. And anything outside of that for you is like, in fact, because I'm in the tech space, and I learned technology so much, and I adopt it very, very quickly just because of how like my brain is wired. I constantly hear people from my generation and generation before completely confused by some of the careers of today, Lola. Like somebody, a content creator, somebody, a social media manager, and I'm like, and then like, you people don't know that these content creator people, they are making way more money than some of y'all would ever have made at that age, being whatever career you were doing, which is not a bad thing. There's no judgment of that. But we need to open up our minds to the fact that we're not living in the same world that we grew up in. And so limiting yourself and even maybe indirectly limiting your children, limiting your own abilities, limiting those around you because you can't understand how there's these new careers, these super careers of the future. How is how is how is you being a generative AI, creator, even a job? We have to just not let our limiting views of life, whether it's from your, exposure from the communities you're from, how far you've seen, limit us in a time when we have a real global village, right? Where you and I are currently living on very different continents, very, very different time zones, she's married from each other, but we can do this podcast, right? These are the opportunities that we're talking about of these times. And so we really have to engage it. And so for me, it's really about on my journey, not letting myself be limited by not just myself, but even those around me. Like I'm always pushing, the most successful people in the world, they just keep pushing themselves. They never stop. They just keep on pushing, no matter how old they are. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm pushing.
Everything you're saying resonates actually with the lady that I interviewed, Yetane Shorters, which she launched the podcast, and she talks about purpose and profit and ties it together. And so I think that's the reason why everybody needs to fall into their purpose at some point, because when you're in alignment, you're a happier person, and everything will fall into place. And I see you nodding your head. So you also talked about something which you actually touched on something which I thought was great, which is the biggest misconceptions of what the world tells us our purpose is or what our goal should be, right? But along those lines, what would you say, especially in your role as a leadership coach, what would you say people also have a misconception on when it comes to the talent and the strengths?
I think that people, first of all, do not realize that your talents are way beyond what you can see, right? So many of our talents have nothing to do with, being artistic or being able to sing or, being able to play a great sport or whatever it is. A lot of them are actually not obvious to the eyes at all. And it's actually through the things that give you energy that you discover that. And what do I mean by that? So you find that when you're with a group of people talking, working, whatever, you're getting energy. That's the pointer towards, some of your natural innate talents. You find that you prefer to be alone, like you find people now and then, but you rather just be alone. All these little things are pointers. Pointers are those things that give you energy. So, like I always say to people, if you make a list of all the things that you do every day, whether it's on your job or in your home or whatever, and you put an E for the things that give you energy, just kind of tracking it, and a D for the things that drain you. If you have more E's than D's, you're in a good place. If you have more D's than E's, you're going to end up sick. And I've seen it before, just coaching people. I've seen people who spend 70% of their day doing things that drain them naturally. As in, it's not because they did anything, just by the way that God made them, those things are draining them. I have seen people end up physically sick, mentally sick, emotionally sick, spiritually sick because of that. And so for me, it is one of those things where I'm constantly trying to educate people and even parents, now, like, guys, listen, pay attention to your children because first of all, we are living in a time of very prevalent mental health issues. But why, as a parent, would you then put a child who is clearly maybe introverted and constantly want them to do extroverted things? It's just not going to work. It's going to drain them. Like like this around it is going to drain them. And so those are some of the biggest things that I've learned on my journey. The other thing I've learned is that the talent will be dormant if you do nothing with them, right? So don't go away because they can't. There are seeds in you, right? But they'll be endless. And it is your responsibility to maximize them. That's why you see some people who are so successful and it looks like they don't really do much. Some of them will even tell you about how they don't live their life. They love their life because they are in alignment with their talents, their energy, their personality. The work they do is in complete alignment. You, on the other hand, are struggling because you're not in alignment. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It takes a lot of intentionality, but hello, we're adults, we're big boys and big girls. We do things that are hard, and you have to make some very hard, tough decisions sometimes to get your life in alignment.
Yes, yes. I love it. I love it. All right. So I could keep talking about this because it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm going to do the plug for you. But if you have not read Unleash Your Powers or Superpowers by Foluso
You
Gbadamosi, I would
must.
highly suggest that
Thank you,
you
Lola.
should.
I
But
appreciate it.
of course, no, it is a good book. It's actually a very quick read as well. And I think you speak in a language that is authentic to the audience on ground.
Thank you.
But I'm also, but like I said, it's a topic that I feel
That you're
passionate
passionate
about.
about.
So
I try very hard to make it like an easy read because I don't like, so too, I don't really like long reading. I mean, I can read, but I don't love it. So I wanted to write a book that is about personal development, but would not be heavy, that would feel relatable and would feel like, okay, I'm vibing with her.
we've talked a lot about your personal growth, your professional evolution, and all the insights you've gained along the way, how you're applying this into what you do today, the work you do. And of course, you're an award winning professional, and you're also highly recognized for all the impact driven work that you do. So, but there's one more thing that I would love to talk about, which is your nonprofit, the one that you co-founded called Serving with Love. Can you talk about what inspired you to focus on computer literacy and coding for young children in rural communities, knowing that you obviously deviated from that space a while back?
Yeah. So, I think that you can really deviate from like technology because it's such a prevalent part of our world. And I find for me,
Yeah.
I'm constantly in technology spaces. Like even some of the boards I'm on, I've been handpicked to be on the board because of my background and like the kind of insights that I would then bring. So Spirit Love really was born out of a need to give back in a way that was impactful and in a way that would help the people that we were giving back to own their own economic future in the sense that they could then learn skills, gain knowledge that
Mm.
could help them bring their families and themselves into better economic positions. And so why do we pick technology? Because it's such a no-brainer. I mean, there's so many young people worldwide who are sitting in one continent and working on another. There's so much being done without any borders now that we were like, listen, this is one of the easiest ways to liberate young people in kind of just having economic stability really. And so when we actually started, we didn't start out like that. So we started out, it's a faith-based foundation. We started out, just showing the love of God to people, through giving them different needs that they would have on like for like daily living. And then we evolved because we decided that we needed to do more that would be like long lasting impact. And that's how we got into, this whole digital life after school program. It's called DLAS. And it's a fantastic program. In fact, we had our graduation for our most recent cohort coming up on October 5th. Um, and we have partnered with the NIIT, which is an organization here in Nigeria that is a technology organization that runs programs, right? And so we partnered with them because they have the curriculum. So I know about strengths, like listen, we all have different strengths. Let us partner for maximum impact with the National Institute of Information Technology, and they do have these courses already. They have the teachers, so we partner with them and they come to our center here in Lagos and they teach the students graduate and all of this good stuff. That's, that's what that is. And it's really just a way to really give those students what they wouldn't get anywhere else. Because unfortunately, as a nation, our education system is not yet at the level that it should be, as far as giving young people the level of education and the exposure with technology that they need, to really make any sort of headway in life. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's amazing work that you're doing.
Thank
Obviously, you're
you.
juggling a lot.
I
Yeah,
sure
you're
am.
juggling a lot.
I sure
You
am.
are obviously taking on a lot of initiatives, which I think are important. But before we go into your latest work, which is your latest book, there is one more stop that I would like to make, which is something a little bit more personal. On LinkedIn, you mentioned about a couple of months ago about your daughter's recent success with the movie called Iwaju. And for those who don't know, this was a movie that was based set in Lagos, Nigeria. It's an Afro-futuristic animated movie that was released in February 2024. It was co-produced with Disney and Kugali, which is a Pan-African entertainment company, and it was also the first collaboration of its kind. It was just a big deal, to say it mildly. But and your daughter was the lead voiceover actress for that role.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you talked about in this LinkedIn post about how it was beautiful just nurturing talent and pursuing one's calling. These are things that are, of course, central to you and everything you've talked about so far. And you also connected all the dots between innate talents, intentional development, fulfilling one's destiny. So, as a mother, right, how was that moment for you, just seeing your daughter uh, basically achieve this remarkable feat and be part of this one of a kind collaboration that had never happened before with Disney, especially?
Yeah. I think that that remains one of my most obviously extremely, extremely proud moments in life. But I think also just like validation about the things that I know that God has been doing for a long time, like I mean, it's just like in my face, because I mean, here's a young girl who at that time, when she auditioned, I think she just turned 10, and it was an audio audition that was done in our house, under like a duvet because it was a voice audition. We didn't even know that it was Disney because we got this casting call email and it was very general, it had like a code name. I didn't think that it was in any sort of international organization, just of it being Disney is something that people have always spoken about, So since she was very little, they've always said, "Oh, your daughter sounds like a cartoon. Her voice is so cute." And I just said to myself, "Okay, sure, like my husband and I didn't really think much of her voice because once again, like that's our first child, like it just sounded to me like a voice. It didn't sound to me like anything extraordinary. No, obviously, remember also like my context. I'm the first child, so this is like the first like she's like the first granddaughter on my side of the family. So I haven't really been too exposed to too many young people's voices. You know what I mean? Not more maybe like teenagers or like, kids that maybe are like 5 and older, but not like so little. So there are many things about her that I think that we ourselves didn't even really pay attention to because we didn't really think that they were a thing until things would happen in life that would then be like, oh, wow, okay, it's a thing. So this voice thing was really just honestly, Lola, like I mean, it's one of the most clear examples to me that God puts seed inside every single person. And your environment, your nurturing environment can either help you grow that seed or it can kill that seed. Because obviously there's nature, which is the things that, God has already put inside of us. And then there's nurture, which is how your environment is helping you, maximize those things that nature has already given you. And once again, I mean, it's just such a validating example of the reality of the things that God has been telling me now for like 10 years or so. Yeah.
Wow, that was well said. So I'm curious as a parent, and you mentioned this at the beginning of our conversation, how your parents did a lot of do as I do. Do
Yeah.
you feel any additional pressure to be a role model to your daughters, just more than you already are, just being their mom?
I don't think that I feel pressure. But I don't think that I feel pressure because of just how I am as a person. So I am somebody who definitely thinks that you shouldn't just live life, que sera, whatever will be, right? I feel like you weren't created to just pass through life and not make any sort of impact. Now, impact obviously is on different levels, and when I say impact, I'm not saying that you can feed 100,000 people or change change the economic future of a million. You get it's anything at all that is within your power to do, no matter how small, right? And so I'm so proud because I feel like this is who I'm supposed to be, right? I don't feel like inauthentic or like I'm living a life where I'm being forced to do something that's not me. I'm really just being myself every single day. I'm living my life, being myself. I'm loving it. Some days are harder than others, obviously, because when you want to be impactful, life is not always very kind, especially in countries like mine where there's so much that is made of financial resources, and there's so many people that they get so sidetracked, like so many destinies have gotten sidetracked by finances that they've made really poor choices. So for me, the impact is coming to a place of, and that's why when God validates things for me, it makes me really fulfilled, because you need to be able to showcase to people that there's a better way to do things, right? With the younger generation, we need to be able to show them that it's not all about, like you say in Nigeria, hammering, which is just making tons of money. What does that even mean? Like, what value are you adding to anybody that you make tons of money? Because what has created an environment where people are willing to do any and everything for money is this idea that you don't have to add any value and you're just going to make money. Like, I don't understand how. And see, for me, I'm just being my authentic self. My authentic self does not fit into a box. It's rarely on a path, it's a trail. And I just want my children, my two daughters, to know that they can create their own trail and be all that God created them to be without feeling like they must fit into anybody's mold. So yeah.
Wow. That is so well said. I love that. I think it's a perfect segue into your latest project, which is Unleash Your Superpowers for Teenagers, which I also have a copy of that.
Yeah.
And it also comes with a companion
Guide.
guide for
Yes.
parents.
Yes.
And so I am super curious to know why you thought it was important to write this book for teenagers. I think I have an inkling based on our conversation, but I want to hear
Yeah.
it in your words.
Yeah. Yeah, so book for teenagers, man. When I read the first book in the series, which is the Unleash Your Superpowers that came out in 2022, I had so many people reaching out to me and telling me you absolutely have to write one for teenagers because I'm happy to be reading this as an adult, but I imagine that if I was a teenager and I had read something like this, it would have been life changing for me. So that definitely put me under pressure because I felt like people were constantly telling me, oh, what about the younger people? Blah, blah, blah. Teenagers are not the easiest people to relate with if you don't understand, how they think, and if you act like somebody that was born an adult. And I think many of us adults act like we were born adults. We forget that we were once teenagers. There's so many things that if you just remember when you were a teenager, you'll be able to relate more with them. Do you get? Because you realize that, listen, nobody was born an adult. We have all been through it. It's just they live in a different time and they have a lot more technology and all that. But there are so many things that our kids or the teens around us are experiencing that we also experience, right? It's not really like that different. And so I then felt very inclined to write the book for teenagers because yeah, I was constantly being told to do so, and the timing was right. The reason I split up the parent slash teacher slash guardian companion guide was because so the book, as you've seen, because you've gotten it, thank you so much, is it's like a workbook, right? So it has a lot of spots for you to write in. And I didn't want the teenagers to feel like their parents or guardians or whoever were reading their own exact book where maybe they had written some of their personal insights. So I felt, okay, it's going to be difficult for you to really achieve much without the guidance of an adult. At that age, I mean, how much can you really achieve by yourself? And so I thought it was important to have something for the older people who, could then kind of just, hey, some great, thing that I read today. Your thoughts about it. What is your toolbox? So you'll see that at the end of the chapters for the teenagers and even to the parents. I keep saying, so what have you discovered to add into your toolbox? Because it's a really, it's a discovery journey kind of a book, and I want them to not just, think that anybody's going to help them discover themselves, but do the work themselves to discover who they are and able to articulate that and share it with their parents, their guardians, their teachers in a way that while these ones are reading their own copy of the book, the teenagers can say, this is what I discovered about myself and say in a way that resonates with whoever it is that is the adults in their lives.
Yeah, no, I thought it was actually a good book. I actually read it out of my own curiosity. And what you did was you were talking to teenagers. You sprinkled in your own stories
Yeah.
across the book. You had all these little parts where you it's almost like you took the time to go back to that part of that age when you were in that
Yes.
age to kind of
Yes.
relate to them. And so I'm
Absolutely.
curious, what was the biggest challenge in translating something as complex as, Clifton Strengths to a digestible book for teenagers? Because, like you said, they're very different. They're not necessarily in that introspective space in their lives.
Yeah.
But we know as adults that if they figure it out sooner, they'll probably be a much happier
Yeah.
adulthood in the future.
Absolutely. Everything about this book
Yeah.
was very hard. Lola. It was hard and it was painful. It was hard, it was painful, it stretched me to no end. I remember when I was done with like the first manuscript and I was like, oh, I need illustration. Why? Because I realized that when I was a teenager, I wasn't going to sit down and read a book that was just full of text. That was a self-help book. I wouldn't.
Mm,
I'm like, no, I need illustration because illustration kind of breaks up, the text. I need a place that they can write. All these things were coming to me as the process was going on. And it was a long, stressful process because, like you said, writing a book for teenagers is very different from writing a book for adults. I mean, currently I'm an adult. I was a teenager, but I'm not currently a teenager, right? So I had to remind myself of some of the experiences I had, like me sharing things about, like being in secondary school slash high school, being like a freshman
hmm
slash a sophomore in university. Like, I have to remember those moments and how my discoveries of myself in those moments shaped who I am today, right? And so I really had to introspect a lot. Um, and I had to think about different types of teenagers, and what they would like, not just a type of teenager that maybe enjoys reading or a type of teenager like me that didn't really care to read that much, but really think about everybody in between and what would appeal to them on a mass level. But even beyond that was doing something for the older people in their lives. Because there's so much that a teenager with so much knowledge can do. If people in their lives limit their knowledge or limit their expression of themselves, then they won't really be able to become their best selves.
Wow. So would you say that these are books that I think any parent who's trying to basically help their kids unleash their superpower should pick up, and also the guide itself, right? They are self-help books. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Would you say there's anything that a parent who's probably not used to digesting this kind of content needs to be aware of? I'm really curious about that, because if
Yeah.
I think if you're someone who does self-help, you get it, but if you're not, but you're looking for something for your kid, how would you bring those people along?
Yeah. So the reason I wrote the companion guide, and I tried to write it in a way that would, I think, appeal across different types of parents and what their interests are, as far as whether they are, into like development or not. Was to write it in like it. So sharing something for me is a big thing, like sharing your personal examples and me sharing about my mom and I, my report cards, like the way that my brain works, all of these things are so that people can think about their own examples with their own children, or with their own,
Right.
students or with the young people in their lives. So it was really me having to share a lot of stories because I think people actually connect more with stories than we do with, just text. I know I do. And so I think for parents like that, the reason I wrote the guide, and I didn't make the guide as long as the actual book. I mean, it's not tiny, it's not long, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of in between. I think it's like 100 pages or so. It's so that they can really quickly just read through it. I actually broke it into different sections intentionally. And I put a lot of actions you would notice inside the two books. So that you don't just feel like you're just reading something, but you can actually engage in dialogue with the young person that's in your life, right? You can have a conversation that would spur on how you see that they are taking in the book and how they are taking in who they are and who they would also like to be in the future.
Yeah. No, I again, I love self-help books, so I was just like, "Oh my goodness." Now I have to convince my son to read it.
Yes,
So that should be fun.
it
But
should be.
I think again, yeah, but I think just having a guide for parents is super helpful. The only other thing I was going to ask you about, and I know we're running out of time here, is that from your experience now, again, and just your personal development work and the leadership work that you do you think being introspective in itself is a talent? Do you think it comes naturally to certain personalities?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, this is just from coaching people, coaching executives, leaders of industries. There are some people who, by nature, they lead with strategic thinking. They are constantly reflecting. In fact, one of my coaching clients of recent, what he's had to do is he's had to get people that are good at executing and even building relationships because that's not his thing. He's constantly introspecting, he's constantly thinking, constantly coming up with ideas that it that's his superpower, right? His superpower is that. His superpower is not executing. His superpower is not doing much to anybody. And so he's have to build a team around himself that is more intentional about, those things that are not his own superpower. And so I definitely think that there's people that are more, they get energy from just sitting down to think. I get energy from sitting down to think with people. So if you put me in a group, right, for some great reflection, or if I'm seeing a therapist or I'm seeing a coach, no problem. But when you just say information, well, I sit by yourself. Now, because I'm actually training myself. But I'll tell you what I've mastered. I've mastered how to get energy to do the things that drain me by organizing my day in a way that is filled with energizers and drainers. By the time I need to do something that drains me, because guess what? We can't live in a world that all we do energizes us, right? You have to learn how to manage your days and your time. I've mastered how to manage myself towards getting the things that give me energy before I then have to do the things that somewhat drain me. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm going to shift gears also just real quick because I also think it's important people understand the mindset that's at play here. Actually, there are two things. One is I think you have a really distinctive, like you said, authentic brand. And for any listeners out there, how would you tell them to be intentional and strategic in building that brand so they can amplify whatever it is they're called to this world to do?
Such a great question. You know, when people ask me, about my social media following, wherever and how I've been able to do it, I find it very difficult to answer because I cannot answer that without talking about the fact that I simply tuned into my God frequency and started to do the things that were
Mm-hmm.
me. Like I usually post through to myself, if you like the amount of things I post, like I don't post, from a strategic. So being strategic is not one of my superpowers. I can be strategic, but it's not something that it's not. I know. Listen, I'm speaking to myself. You can't even insult me and tell me that I'm not something. I know what I'm not, and I know what I am. Do you understand? Like I'll be like, thank you, I know. You're telling me this,
Right.
I didn't know before. So I sit down and kind of strategize. In fact, the things that I needed strategy for, I've either hired people to do them, or I found the friends that I know are super strategic, and I call them and I talk to them about it because on my own I can't. Do you understand? It's not my natural area of strength. And I can come up with something, but they will do better because that's their natural area of strength. So another thing for me is learning how to build the community. And that's something that maybe, I would ultimately close this session with is nobody's perfect, right? All of us have strengths and weaknesses. You need to master how to build a community around yourself or people that have strengths where you're weak and all of that, instead of you trying to think that you can be all things to all people. So yeah, for my social media and my LinkedIn posts, I really just post in a way that is me. It sounds like me apparently. Some people tell me that when they read it sometimes, like those that know me, they're like, I can actually hear your voice in them. I'm just being myself. I'm trying to see the people out there that they should just be themselves. Um, there's definitely, things that you can learn generally, from people that teach about how to post on LinkedIn, how to, package
Mm-hmm.
yourself. But you need to be yourself when you are doing those things so that you don't sound like a robot. You know what I mean? This is one time
Or
I
them.
can post the same things,
Yeah.
but then
Yeah.
we're posting it as ourselves in our own voices.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. All right. So we're definitely on the clock here. And of course, I could talk to you for a while. So we may have to bring you back for another episode. I don't know. We'll
That
see.
would be great.
Oh, I would love that. So there you go, guys. We already signed her up. So before we go into the lightning round, there's one more thing I would love for you to tell people, which is what is the one thing that anyone listening can do to start the process of discovering their talents, superpowers, and their purpose. We already suggested the book, but is there anything else you would suggest that they do?
Buy the book. Buy Unleasing Superpowers. It's on Amazon. That's the answer. I'm like, hello.
That's your answer. I love it. Yeah, we'll put all this
Great.
information in the show notes so everyone has easy access on getting this information. All right, so let's wrap up. And this is what I call the lightning round. Do not, I have to say this especially to my Nigerians, please do not do more than yourself. Just answer the question. Simple instructions, no essay, no extra. Whatever comes to your mind is what you should say. No wrong answer. All right. So what is the last thing you learned or what are you learning now?
I'm learning how to communicate with people that are not like me.
Oh, yeah, we definitely have to bring you back for that. You mentioned your favorite book, but do you have a favorite quote that influences you, keeps you grounded, anything that has shaped you into the woman you are today?
1,000,000%. I do. To thyself be true.
I love that. Okay. What would you consider your greatest achievement to date?
I think just being intentional in forging an unusual path.
Oh, I like that. Okay. And what matters the most to you?
Family, God. God must family all the way.
Yeah. Your greatest
Yeah.
fear. Your greatest fear. What are you most afraid of?
Not maximizing my potential.
Yeah, you said that earlier too, and I figured that was what you're gonna say. If you could go back in time, what would you tell yourself when you were in your 20s?
Make the best of each season of your life.
Ooh, okay, Felicia. Three words that you would use to describe you, the Kadara woman.
Dynamic, positive, fun.
Yay. What are your thoughts on destiny?
I think everybody should be trying to fulfill their destiny.
And then, last question, looking back on your journey to date, what would you say has been the most important lesson you've learned about finding and pursuing your purpose?
It belongs to you and nobody else.
Ooh, okay. And I love it. That was a good lightning round, Felicia. Who would have thought? Thank you so much for such a great conversation. Like I said, we probably could have kept on talking, but you wouldn't be a Kadara woman if you're not busy. So I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I had a great time. Thank you for this amazing initiative. Well done to you and your team. Keep on doing amazing things. Thank you.
As we wrap up this inspiring conversation with Foluso Gbadamosi, I hope you're walking away with some powerful insights. Remember, your unique talents are seeds just waiting to be nurtured. Whether you're a professional looking to align your career with your purpose, a parent hoping to guide their children, or a young person on the cusp of discovering your potential, Foluso's journey reminds us that self-discovery is a continuous, rewarding process. So I hope you take our advice to heart. Be intentional about understanding yourself, embrace your own authenticity, and don't be afraid to forge your own path. Thank you for listening to today's episode on the Kadara Woman podcast, and I hope you keep unleashing those superpowers that lay dormant within you. And if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate, review, and share. You can also follow us on social media at Kadara Woman. Until next time, this is Lala with the Kadara Woman podcast, reminding you that your Kadara Woman of clarity may have already happened, and all you need to do is embrace it. This podcast was created, produced, and recorded by Lala Shebo Harris and sound edited by Mo Isu. The Kadara Woman podcast is a production of Kadara Media.